The antique crystal champagne flute shattered at her feet, a spray of glass, and Dom Perignon soaking the hem of her simple white dress. "Get out!" Genevieve De Luca shrieked, her voice echoing in the marble foyer. "Get your cheap gold-digging hands off my son!" Elara. Vance stumbled back, the bodice of her dress ripped open from where her future mother-in-law had clawed at her. Guests arriving for the most anticipated wedding of the Hampton season stared in shocked silence. Her fiancé Marcus stood frozen at the top of the grand staircase, his face as pale as his tuxedo. She was publicly shamed, publicly stripped of her dignity. But they had made one fatal mistake. They assumed she was alone. Elara Vance believed with the earnest naivety of a true romantic that love was enough. She was a librarian, not a high-powered curator at the Met, but a community librarian in a quiet Brooklyn branch. She found solace in the scent of old paper and the silent hum of shared knowledge. It was there in the biography aisle that she had met Marcus De Luca. He was by all accounts a catch. Handsome, charming, and the scion of the De Luca family whose name was synonymous with old New York real estate and fine art. Marcus seemed enchanted by her simplicity. "You're real," he'd tell her, kissing her hands, which, unlike the women he grew up with, were not perpetually manicured. "You don't care about the name, the money." He was right. Elara didn't care about the money. She had spent the last 6 years actively running from it. Elara Vance was a self-imposed alias. Her real name was Elara Blackwood, and her father was Cyrus Blackwood, the founder and CEO of Blackwood Global, a man who didn't just move markets, he was the market. He was a titan, a legend, a name whispered with fear and awe in boardrooms from Shanghai to Silicon Valley. And Elara hated him, or rather she hated what he represented. Her mother, a gentle artist, had withered in the shadow of his ambition, dying of a broken heart, which doctors had clinically diagnosed as a stress-induced coronary, while Cyrus was closing a hostile takeover in Germany. At the funeral, a 20-year-old Elara had thrown his check for the expenses back in his face. "You can't buy this one, Dad," she had spat and walked away. She had changed her last name to her mother's Vance and built a life where her only value was her own. Now, she was marrying Marcus. And in doing so, she was walking into a family that only cared about value. The De Lucas, the matriarch Genevieve, the blustering patriarch Fabio, and the venomous sister Isabella were a different breed. They were old money in name, but their fortunes had been dwindling for 2 generations. They lived in a sprawling Hamptons estate that was mortgaged to the hilt, maintaining an illusion of grandeur that was cracking at the seams. From the moment Elara was introduced, they saw her as a contamination. "A librarian," Genevieve had said at their first meeting at the Carlyle, her painted-on smile not reaching her eyes. "How quaint. I suppose someone has to check out the books." Isabella, an influencer whose entire life was a curated performance of wealth, was more direct. "I just don't get it, Marcus." She'd sigh loud enough for Elara to hear. "Her dress is from where J. Crew. Is that even still a thing?" Elara tried. She smiled, she deferred, she wore the suffocatingly expensive, and to her ugly designer dress Genevieve had gifted her for the engagement party. She did it all for Marcus. He was her anchor, her proof that she could have a normal, loving family, one built on affection, not assets. "They'll warm up to you, Ellie," Marcus would promise, rubbing her shoulders in their shared apartment, an apartment Elara paid for with her librarian's salary, as Marcus's allowance was often mysteriously delayed. "They're just traditional." But as the wedding approached traditional, began to feel more like hostile. Genevieve had taken over every detail. The wedding was not to be the simple garden ceremony Elara wanted, but a 500-guest spectacle at the Hamptons estate. Elara's one request had been to wear her mother's wedding dress, a simple vintage lace gown. A week before the wedding, the dress went missing from the bridal suite. "It's a tragedy," Genevieve had said, patting Elara's hand. "It must have been one of the cleaning staff. They're so careless. Don't you worry, my dear. I've already had Vera Wang overnight a replacement. It's much more appropriate." The replacement was a monstrous confection of silk and crystal, heavy and cold. When Elara put it on, she felt like she was in costume a puppet for the DeLuca family show. But she held her tongue for Marcus. The lie of her identity, however, was becoming a heavy burden. "My family is simple," she'd told Marcus. "They're from Oregon. Farmers. They're very private. They won't be coming to the wedding." It was a plausible, pathetic story, and it sealed their opinion of her. She was a nobody, a mousy little commoner, as she'd overheard Isabella call her. She was poor, unconnected, and in their eyes her only motive must be a parasitic attachment to their name. They had no idea that the nobody from Oregon could buy their entire crumbling legacy with the interest from her untouched trust fund. She had never touched it, never wanted it, but it was there. She didn't tell Marcus the truth because for the first time in her life, she wanted to be loved for Elara Vance. She feared that the moment the name Blackwood was spoken, the man she loved would change. She was about to find out in the most brutal way possible that he already had. The rehearsal dinner was a symphony of microaggressions, and Genevieve DeLuca was its conductor. It was held on the sprawling oceanfront terrace of the estate under a canopy of fairy lights that probably cost more than Elara's annual salary. 200 of New York's elite were in attendance, their diamonds glinting like weapons in the twilight. Elara wore a simple, elegant navy blue silk dress, her own dress purchased from a small boutique. It was her one small act of rebellion. "Elara, darling." Genevieve glided over holding 2 glasses of champagne. "You look comfortable." She handed Elara a glass, and as she did, accidentally sloshed the contents of her own glass, a full glass of red Bordeaux, down the front of Elara's dress. A collective gasp hushed the terrace. "Oh, goodness me," Genevieve shrieked, dabbing at the stain with a napkin which only smeared the red deeper into the blue silk. "How clumsy of me, this old arthritis." Isabella materialized at her mother's elbow. "Oh, Mommy, don't worry. It's not like the dress was Chanel." She looked at Elara with pitying eyes. "Maybe one of the maids has a t-shirt you can borrow." Elara stood trembling, the cold wine seeping through to her skin. She looked for Marcus. He was across the lawn laughing with his old fraternity brothers, oblivious. I'll just go change," Elara mumbled, fighting back tears. "Yes, you do that, dear," Genevieve said, turning her back to Elara and addressing the crowd. "More champagne, everyone. Let's not let a little spill ruin our night." Elara fled up the stairs to the guest room she'd been given. As she passed the library, she heard voices, Fabio and Genevieve, their tones low and urgent. She stopped her hand on the doorframe, every instinct telling her to hide. "Can't handle this, Genevieve." Fabio's voice was a panicked whisper. "The creditors from Sotheby's called again. The bank is moving to seize the Monet. If we don't get the liquidity injection from Marcus's trust fund after the wedding, we're finished." "He will release the funds," Genevieve said, her voice like ice. "He's a fool for that little mouse, but he's our fool. The marriage contract is ironclad. Once she's a DeLuca, his trust is tied to our family. We just need him to sign the release. And if he doesn't, he will. But that girl, she's a problem. She's not as stupid as she looks. She keeps asking Marcus about the finances, about his money. Elara View's blood ran cold. His money. Marcus had told her his trust was inaccessible until he was 35. He'd used it as an excuse for why they lived in her tiny apartment. And that prenup, Genevieve hissed. Our lawyer said it's weak. If she ever found out about our leverage, if she ever divorced him, she could take what little we have left. Then we need to make sure she has nothing to stand on, Fabio said. We need insurance. I've already handled it, Genevieve said. Isabella found something that will make sure that if she ever thinks of crossing us, she will be so thoroughly ruined, so publicly humiliated, that she'll have no choice but to be the obedient little wife we need. A door clicked open down the hall. Elara bolted, heart-hammering, into her room. She locked the door and sank to the floor, the wine-soaked dress clinging to her. It wasn't about love. It wasn't about status. It was about survival. They weren't just snobs. They were desperate. They were bankrupt. And they were using Marcus to trap her, to secure their financial lifeline. A light knock. Ellie, you in there? It was Marcus. She opened the door, her face pale. Hey, what happened? He said, looking at her dress. Mom told me you had a little accident. She looked at him, really looked at him. The charming smile, the easygoing eyes. Was it all a lie? Marcus, she said, her voice shaking. Your parents, they're in financial trouble, aren't they? His face changed. The charm vanished, replaced by a cold, nervous mask. What are you talking about? Don't be ridiculous. I overheard them. They're talking about your trust fund, about creditors. You were eavesdropping. He snapped his voice hard. My God, Elara, what is wrong with you? Is that what your simple family does? Listen at doors. They're using you, Marcus. They're using us. You're being hysterical, he said, turning away. You're stressed about the wedding. You need to pull yourself together. You're embarrassing me. Embarrassing you? Yes, my mother is right. You don't fit in. You're not even trying. You walk around with this judgment on your face like you're better than us. You're a librarian. You're lucky to even be here. The cruelty of it hit her like a physical blow. This wasn't the man she loved. This was a stranger, a weak, cruel boy hiding in a man's body. Just get changed, he said, his voice softening slightly, a manipulator's tactic. Wear the new dress. Smile. Be the woman I fell in love with. Please, Ellie, for me. After tomorrow, it'll all be over. We'll be married. It'll be fine. He left, closing the door behind him. Elara stood in the silence, the cold truth settling over her. It wouldn't be fine. She looked at the Vera Wang monster hanging on the wardrobe. It was a shroud. She had to leave. She packed her small bag, the one containing her nobody life. She had her passport, her wallet, and the simple torn backup dress she'd brought, her mother's dress. She'd get it fixed. She'd go back to her apartment, back to her books. She was Elara Vance. She didn't need a DeLuca, and she certainly didn't need a Blackwood. She would be her own person. She waited until she heard the party wind down, until the last car had crunched on the gravel driveway. She slipped out of her room, her sneakers silent on the thick carpet. She would call a cab from the main road. She was almost at the grand staircase, almost at the front door, when the lights snapped on. Going somewhere? Genevieve DeLuca stood at the base of the stairs, flanked by Isabella. Both were in their silk dressing gowns, their faces masks of cold fury. I thought I'd get some air. Elara lied, her heart pounding. With your suitcase, dear. Isabella sneered, stepping forward. running away, or just robbing us blind. I'm not robbing anyone, Elara said, her voice rising. I'm leaving. I'm not marrying Marcus. I know what you're doing. I know you're bankrupt. The admission hung in the air. Genevieve's face for a split second registered pure, unadulterated panic. Then it hardened into something truly terrifying. You, she whispered, her voice trembling with rage. You ungrateful little bitch! You think you can just walk away after everything we've done for you, after you seduced my son? He seduced me, Elara cried. He lied to me. You all did. She's a thief, Mother, Isabella said, her eyes gleaming. I bet that's her plan. Marry Marcus, then divorce him and take half. You have nothing to take, Elara shot back. You're broke. The Monet is being seized. Your family is a house of cards. That was the final straw. Genevieve let out a sound like a feral animal. You will not ruin us. She advanced up the stairs. You will not leave this house. Stay away from me, Elara shouted, backing up. Marcus appeared at the top of the stairs, rubbing his eyes. What's going on? It's 4 a.m. Your fiancée, Genevieve spat, is a gold-digging whore. She was trying to leave. She's been blackmailing us. What, Elara? Marcus looked at her, his face a mask of confusion. Marcus, they're lying. They're bankrupt. They're using your trust fund to save themselves. Shut up, Isabella screamed and lunged for Elara's bag. What did you steal? The family silver grandmother's pearls. She ripped the bag from Elara's shoulder, and it tumbled open, spilling its contents. A change of clothes, a well-worn copy of Jane Eyre, a toothbrush, and the folded, delicate lace of her mother's wedding dress. What is this? Isabella said, picking it up with 2 fingers as if it were contaminated. That's my mother's, Elara said, her voice dropping to a dangerous low. Give it back. This rag, Isabella laughed. This is what you were going to wear. My God, the shame. Give it to me, Isabella. Or what? Isabella sneered. What will a little nobody like you do? And she ripped it. With a sickening sound, the antique lace tore from bodice to hem. Elara saw red. She lunged not at Isabella, but at the front door. She had to get out. She was halfway across the foyer when the wedding guests, the early wedding guests, the planners, the florists, the string quartet began to arrive for the 11 a.m. ceremony. It was 7 a.m. They all stopped staring at the scene. Elara, in a wine-stained dress, hair wild. Isabella holding a torn piece of lace, and Genevieve, her face a mask of theatrical fury. Genevieve, a master performer, saw her audience. She seized the moment. Stop her! She shrieked, pointing at Elara. She's a thief! She was trying to steal my pearls! She ripped off her own necklace and threw it at Elara's feet. She tried to blackmail us. She threatened my son. This was the scene that greeted the first wave of high society guests. Get out! Genevieve roared, her voice echoing in the now crowded foyer. She lunged at Elara, grabbing the front of her simple navy dress. Get your cheap gold-digging hands off my son! With a savage pull, she tore the fabric. The sound of ripping silk was like a gunshot. The dress gaped open, revealing Elara's simple bra. Elara stumbled back, clutching the torn fabric to her chest. She was surrounded. Cameras were out, not paparazzi, but guests, their phones held high, capturing the scandal. She looked up past the shocked faces to the top of the stairs. Marcus was still standing there. He watched his mother publicly assault and humiliate the woman he claimed to love. He watched his sister laugh. He watched the crowd film it. And he did nothing. A single cold tear cut a path through the grime on Elara's cheek. It wasn't the humiliation that broke her. It was the betrayal. Get out, Genevieve whispered, her face inches from Ilara's. "And if you ever tell anyone what you overheard, I will release the photos Isabella found of you. The ones from your simple life in Oregon. The ones of you passed out at that frat party. You will be ruined." A security guard hired for the wedding grabbed Ilara's arm. "Ma'am, you need to leave." He dragged her half-dressed and sobbing through the marble foyer, past the towering floral displays, and threw her quite literally onto the gravel driveway. Her small, torn suitcase, holding the ruins of her mother's dress, was thrown out after her. The massive iron gates of the DeLuca estate swung shut with a deafening final clang. Ilara Vance sat on the gravel, exposed, broken, and utterly alone. The world had gone silent. Then from the pocket of her torn dress, she felt a vibration. Her phone. They had missed her phone. Her fingers, numb and shaking, pulled it out. The screen was cracked. She had one number. The number she had sworn on her mother's grave she would never, ever call. Her thumb hovered over the contact. Cyrus. She pressed the button. It rang once. "This had better be life or death, Ilara. I'm in a meeting." His voice was exactly as she remembered, cold, precise, and continents away. She choked back a sob. "Dad," when she whispered the word, tasting like ash in her mouth. "Dad, I need you." 6,000 miles away, in a glass-walled boardroom overlooking the neon-lit sprawl of Tokyo. Cyrus Blackwood sat at the head of a 30-foot table. He was surrounded by 24 of Japan's most powerful executives, the board of Mori Tech. This was the final 72-hour negotiating session for a $200 billion acquisition. It was the hostile takeover of the decade. Cyrus Blackwood was a man who ran on precision and control. He never raised his voice, never showed emotion. His stillness was more terrifying than another man's rage. He was known as the Surgeon because he could dismantle a company with bloodless, terrifying accuracy. His personal phone, the one on a secure encrypted line, never rang. Ever. When it vibrated on the table, the entire boardroom tensed. He looked at the caller ID. Ilara, his daughter. The one part of his life that was not precise, not controlled. The one part he had failed. He silenced the room with a single raised finger and answered. "This had better be life or death, Ilara. I'm in a meeting." And then he heard it. The sound that vaporized $200 billion deals. The sound that stopped the world. A raw, choked sob, and 6 words. Dad, I need you." The icy control in Cyrus's eyes was instantly replaced by a black, terrifying fire. The air temperature in the room dropped 10 degrees. "Where are you?" he said, his voice dangerously quiet. I don't know," Ilara wept. "Outside their house, the Hamptons. They threw me out, Dad. They tore my dress." Cyrus's knuckles gripping the phone turned white. "Who? The DeLucas. Marcus's family. The wedding. It's not... Oh God, Dad." "Stay where you are," Cyrus said. He was already standing. "Don't talk to anyone. Don't move. I'm sending a car. I'm on my way." He hung up. The Japanese executive stared at him. Mr. Mori, the aged CEO, cleared his throat. "Mr. Blackwood, the final revised offer." Cyrus Blackwood looked at the men he had been systematically dismantling for 3 days. He picked up his briefcase. "Gentlemen," he said, his voice flat and cold, The deal is off." "Off," Mr. Morey stammered. "But we were prepared to accept." "My original offer," Cyrus said, walking to the door, "was 150 billion. You countered at 180. I'm now displeased. My new and final offer is 120 billion. You have 1 hour to accept. If you do not, I will spend the next 6 months buying your debt, poaching your top engineers, and burning your company to the ground. You will not be acquired. You will be liquidated." He didn't wait for a response. He strode out of the boardroom, his assistant, Ms. Thorne, already matching his stride tablet in hand. "Ms. Thorne," Cyrus said, not breaking pace. "Sir, the Gulfstream is being refueled at Narita. Flight plan to New York is filed. We have a 14-hour flight time." "Make it 12. I'll speak to the pilot, sir." "Get Arthur Langley on the phone. Tell him I have a Red Delta situation. I want him in New York by the time I land." Ms. Thorne's eyes widened. Red Delta. That code hadn't been used since the corporate espionage scandal in Dubai. It meant war. "Yes, sir." "And Ms. Thorne, get me everything on a family called DeLuca in the Hamptons. Real estate art finance. I want to know the name of their dentist and what brand of toilet paper they use. I want it before we cross the international date line." "At once, Mr. Blackwood." As Cyrus settled into the plush leather seat of the G650, the plane streaking into the night sky, he opened his tablet. Ms. Thorne had already forwarded the first file. It was a public feed. A New York Post online exclusive already going viral. "Hampton's wedding horror. Gold digger bride-to-be kicked out after blackmail plot." There was a video. He watched it. He watched his daughter Elara, his only child, the last living piece of his dead wife, cowering on the steps of a vulgar mansion. He watched a gaudy, middle-aged woman rip her dress open. He watched a crowd film it. He watched a weak-chinned boy watch it. He closed the tablet. He did not speak. He did not move. He simply stared into the darkness of the cabin for 14 straight hours. The surgeon was out. The father was in. And he was coming to collect. While Cyrus Blackwood was 30,000 feet over the Pacific, a black, unmarked sedan, the kind that whispers federal government or unlimited money, had pulled up to the DeLuca estate's gates. A man in a simple, well-tailored suit stepped out. He was nondescript, the kind of man you'd forget instantly. This was his greatest asset. His name was Arthur Langley. He was Cyrus Blackwood's fixer. He was ex-MI6, had a law degree from Yale, and possessed zero conscience where his employer's interests were concerned. He found Elara huddled on the side of the road, wrapped in a foil emergency blanket given to her by a shocked policeman who had been called to the disturbance. "Miss Vance," Arthur said, his voice gentle. Elara looked up, her face stained with tears and dirt. "My name is Arthur Langley. I work for your father. He sent me to bring you to safety." He helped her into the car, wrapping her in a cashmere blanket. He handed her a bottle of water and a small sealed bag. "Your father thought you might want these." Inside were a new encrypted phone and a simple black credit card. The Centurion card. No name, no limit. "Where are we going?" she whispered. "The Pierre," Arthur replied. "We've taken the presidential suite. Your father will be there in 4 hours." Elara slept a deep, exhausted, dreamless sleep in the back of the car. The penthouse suite at the Pierre had been transformed into a high-tech war room. Arthur's Team 3 specialists who had appeared as if from nowhere had set up laptops, secure monitors, and whiteboards. Elara sat in a silk robe having showered and ate the first food she'd had in 24 hours. Cyrus Blackwood entered at 5 p.m. New York time. He hadn't slept. He hadn't changed his suit. He looked as immaculate as if he'd just stepped out of his office. He didn't hug Ilara. Blackwoods didn't hug in a crisis. He walked over to her, cupped her chin, and tilted her face to the light, inspecting her like a priceless, damaged artifact. "They put their hands on you," he stated. It wasn't a question. "Dad, did they?" "Yes," she whispered. "Genevieve, she tore my dress." He nodded a single sharp movement. "Arthur." Arthur Langley stepped forward, holding a tablet. "Cyrus, the DeLuca family. Old money on the outside, a rotten core. They've been insolvent for 3 years." "Go on." "Fabio DeLuca," Arthur said, swiping to a new screen. "Massive gambling debts. We're talking 30 million minimum to private casinos in Macau. He's been using their Fine Art Foundation as a shell. He's not just buying art. He's using it as collateral for high-interest black market loans." Another swipe. Genevieve DeLuca née Smith. Not old money at all. Her father was a butcher in Queens. She's been faking it for 40 years. She's the one driving the social climbing. Another swipe. Isabella DeLuca. Her influencer lifestyle is funded by sponsors. Was anyway. We found irregularities. She's been faking her engagement numbers using a bot farm in Romania. Also, she has a significant recreational drug problem supplied by a rather unsavory dealer in the city. Another swipe. Marcus DeLuca. Weak, spineless. His trust fund, 50 million from his actual old money grandfather, unlocks upon marriage. He's known about his family's bankruptcy for 6 months. The marriage was a bailout. He was complicit. Ilara flinched. The last word hit her. Complicit. Cyrus's face was unreadable. "And the humiliation, it's everywhere, sir," Arthur said, his face grim. He gestured to a monitor. "The video from the Post has 4 million views. Hampton harlot is trending. Isabella DeLuca is fanning the flames, giving anonymous interviews about Ilara's blackmail and unstable nature." Cyrus watched the video again, his jaw tightening. "They built a narrative," Cyrus said. "She's a gold digger. She's unstable. She's a thief. They are justifying their actions." "Yes, sir. It's effective." "Good," Cyrus said. Ilara and Arthur both looked at him. "Good?" Ilara asked. "The higher they build their platform," Cyrus said, "the further they will fall." Arthur. "Sir, I'm not interested in a lawsuit. Lawsuits are slow. They are messy. I am interested in retribution. I want them ruined, not just financially. I want them socially, professionally, and personally erased. I want them to be a cautionary tale, a myth of what happens when you touch what is mine. Am I clear?" "Perfectly, Cyrus." Phase 1 Finance. Cyrus began to pace, the predator's instinct taking over. "They are bankrupt. Let's make it official. You said they have loans. Their primary debt, the estate, the art, it's all held by one boutique investment bank, Helios Capital." "Buy it," Cyrus said. Arthur didn't blink. "Sir Helios is a $900 million bank." "I am aware. Use the holding company in Geneva. Pay a 30% premium for a 51% controlling interest. I want it done by morning. I want to be the bank that owns their lives. And when we are, you will call in their loans. All of them, at once. Citing moral clauses and breach of contract based on their fraudulent activities. The Macau debt buy that too. I want to own Fabio's kneecaps. Understood. Phase 2. Phase 2 social. Cyrus looked at the video of Genevieve. She lives for her status. I want it gone. She's on the board of the Children's Charity Ball, correct? Yes, and the Met Gala Planning Committee. Not anymore. I'm the primary donor for both. Make the call. Have her removed. Publicly. Cite behavior unbecoming of the committee. Isabella. Her sponsors. I own a controlling interest in LVMH, which owns half of them. I want her contracts terminated. All of them. Post the evidence of her bot farm to page 6. Let's see how her followers react. And Marcus? Arthur asked. Cyrus looked at Ilara. Her face was pale. Ilara, Cyrus asked. The boy. What do you want for him? Ilara thought of him standing on the stairs. That spineless, awful nothingness. I want him left with them, she said, her voice shaking but gaining strength. I want him to be trapped in the ruins he helped create. I want him to know for the rest of his life that he chose this. Cyrus nodded. He will have nothing. When the bank, which is us, seizes the family assets, we will freeze his trust fund in the ensuing legal battle. He will be as bankrupt as they are. He will be tied to them, a financial and social anchor for the rest of his life. There's one more thing, Arthur said, holding up the torn lace dress Ilara's team had recovered from the driveway. The dress they tore. That was my mother's, Ilara whispered. Cyrus's eyes for the first time showed a flicker of pain. He took the delicate fabric. This was an act of shame, he said. They didn't just throw you out. They stripped you. They shamed you with your past, with your mother's memory. Our response must be equal. It's not enough to take their money. What do you mean, Dad? I want to strip them. Publicly. I want to take everything they hide behind their home, their art, their clothes, and I want to sell it off piece by piece in front of the entire world. I want them to stand in an empty room just as they left you on that driveway with nothing but the clothes on their back. The foreclosure auction, Arthur said, a slow smile spreading. We can legally expedite it. We can make it the event of the season. Do it, Cyrus said. And Arthur, the heirloom pearls Genevieve accused my daughter of stealing, I want them. I'm going to wear them. The next 48 hours were a masterclass in societal annihilation. The DeLucas, blissfully unaware, woke up the morning after the wedding on a high. Their problem was gone. The Post article had cemented their narrative. They were the victims. Genevieve woke up, poured a mimosa, and called her best friend Beatrice Vanderbilt Hayes to gossip. Beatrice's butler answered. Mrs. Vanderbilt Hayes is not available to you, Mrs. DeLuca, now or in the future. Click. Genevieve stared at the phone. Confused, she tried to log into her email to check the schedule for the Met Gala committee. Her password didn't work. A cold dread began to creep in. A new email appeared in her inbox. It was a public press release. Metropolitan Museum of Art announces removal of Genevieve DeLuca from Planning Committee. The reason cited, a gross and public display of conduct that runs contrary to the philanthropic and empathetic spirit of the museum. Fabio, she shrieked. Fabio, come here. Someone is doing something. Fabio, however, was in his own private hell. His phone was ringing. It was a number from Macau. He never ever wanted to answer that number. Mr. DeLuca, a cold British voice said it was Arthur Langley, using a voice modulator. We are calling to inform you that your $30 million line of credit with us has been acquired. We are the new owners of your debt, and we are calling it in. You have 24 hours to remit payment, or we will be forced to collect." Fabio dropped the phone. Simultaneously, Isabella De Luca was at a Chanel brunch for her fellow influencers. When she went to post a selfie, her Instagram account popped up. "This account has been suspended for violation of community standards, bot activity, and fraudulent engagement." She turned panicked to her friends. They were all looking at a page 6 blast that had just gone out. "Isabella Fraudulenka, De Luca sister busted for buying fake followers." "Isabella," her manager said, walking over his face white. "Chanel, Dior, and Fendi have all pulled their contracts. You're done. You're toxic." The De Lucas scrambled, trying to call their lawyers, their bankers, their friends. No one answered. Their lines of credit were frozen. Their cards were declined. And then at 5 p.m., the final official-looking email arrived. It was from Helios Capital, now secretly owned by Cyrus Blackwood. "Dear Mr. and Mrs. De Luca, due to recently discovered evidence of financial fraud, felony non-disclosure, and breach of moral covenants, we are hereby exercising our right to call in your entire outstanding debt, totaling $87.4 million on all properties and assets, effective immediately. A court-ordered foreclosure has been granted. Your estate and all its contents will be seized and sold at public auction in 72 hours. You are required by law to be present. You are permitted to keep 1 suitcase of personal clothing. Thank you, the management." Genevieve fainted. Fabio's hands were shaking so badly he couldn't light his cigar. Marcus, who had been hiding in his room, came down to see his parents' world utterly shattered. "Mom, Dad, it's over," Fabio whispered. We're ruined." Marcus finally understood. The girl he threw away, the nobody from Oregon, was the only thing standing between his family and this. And he had let them destroy her. The auction was the most talked about event in New York. Arthur Langley had masterfully leaked to the press that this wasn't just a foreclosure, it was a scandal sale. 200 people packed the grand ballroom of the De Luca estate. This was the same room where the wedding reception was supposed to happen. Instead, society vultures, rubberneckers, and journalists had gathered to pick over the corpse of the De Luca dynasty. And by legal decree, Genevieve, Fabio, Marcus, and Isabella were forced to sit in the front row on folding chairs as their entire lives were auctioned off. They looked like ghosts, gaunt, pale, and dressed in last season's designs. The auctioneer began. Lot 1, a 19th century French chandelier. Bidding starts at $10,000. $1 million, a voice called from the back. The room went silent. The crowd parted. Cyrus Blackwood entered. He was dressed in a perfect, bespoke Briony suit. On his arm was Alara. She was unrecognizable. Her mousy brown hair was gone, styled in a sharp, elegant bob that highlighted her high cheekbones, her mother's cheekbones. She was wearing a blood-red Armani power suit. She looked not like a librarian, but like a queen. Mr. Blackwood, the auctioneer stammered. The bid is 1 million sold, Cyrus said, not even looking at the chandelier. Genevieve's mouth opened. She stared at Cyrus, then at Alara. The resemblance, the power, the money. It all clicked. You, she whispered, her voice a reedy rasp. You're her father. Cyrus ignored her. He and Alara took seats directly opposite the De Lucas. Lot 2, the auctioneer continued, sweating. The Monet bidding starts at, well, the bank has seized it as part of a fraud investigation. The FBI, tipped off by Arthur, chose that moment to enter. Fabio De Luca, an agent said. "You're under arrest for wire fraud, bank fraud, and racketeering." Fabio didn't even protest. He just held out his hands for the cuffs. "No," Genevieve screamed. "No, this isn't happening. Lot 3, the auctioneer squeaked, trying to regain control. "A set of South Sea pearls, formerly the property of Mrs. DeLuca." This was the necklace they had accused Ilara of stealing. 100,000, Cyrus said. 200,000, a rival socialite shouted. 500,000, Cyrus said, his voice bored. The room went silent. "Sold to Mr. Blackwood." Cyrus's assistant collected the pearls. Cyrus walked across the ballroom and stood in front of Genevieve. He unclasped the pearls. "You have remarkable taste, Genevieve," he said, his voice just for her. "They're almost as beautiful as the ones my wife used to wear." He didn't give them to Ilara. He fastened them around his own neck, a deliberate, bizarre, and terrifying power move. He was wearing her shame. You can't do this!" Isabella shrieked, finally breaking. "We'll sue you! We'll— You have nothing," Ilara said, her voice clear and cold, cutting across the room. It was the first time she had spoken. She stood and walked over to her ex-fiancé. Marcus looked up at her, his eyes hollow tears streaming down his face. "Ilara. Ellie, please, I love you. I didn't know. I was scared. Please, help us. I'll do anything." Ilara looked at him, this broken, pathetic man. She felt nothing. No, that wasn't true. She felt pity. The same pity one feels for an insect. "You knew," she said. "You knew they were cruel. You knew they were liars. And you let them. You stood on that staircase, Marcus. You stood there and you watched. You didn't just lose your money. You lost your spine. You lost me." She leaned in, and he flinched, expecting a blow. She simply took the wilting, expensive boutonniere from his lapel. "You chose this," she said. "You chose them. So live with them." She turned her back on him. "Arthur," Cyrus called out. "We're done here. I'm bored. Buy the rest of the estate. Have it bulldozed. I want to build a public library on the land." As they walked out, the FBI agents were arresting Genevieve and Isabella as co-conspirators to the fraud. Marcus was left alone on the folding chair, the only DeLuca not in handcuffs, but the only one truly imprisoned, a bankrupt ghost, in his own ruined home. 6 months later, the name DeLuca was little more than a morbid punchline at Manhattan cocktail parties. It was a name synonymous with spectacular, almost biblical social and financial ruin. The New York Post had immortalized them on a half-dozen covers, their trial for fraud, racketeering, and conspiracy becoming a spectator sport. The final damning image had been of Genevieve Fabio and Isabella in identical orange jumpsuits, their faces stripped of pride and makeup, receiving sentences that guaranteed they wouldn't see a Hampton sunset for at least a decade. Marcus, in a final act of spinelessness, had testified against his entire family to save himself. It hadn't worked. While he avoided jail time, his trust fund was annihilated in the fires of the bankruptcy and ensuing lawsuits. He was a pariah, a man with no name, no money, and no future. In the 80th floor corner office of the Blackwood Global Tower, overlooking a sun-drenched Central Park, Ilara Blackwood looked at none of this. On the frosted glass door, the name was etched in clean, severe font, Ilara Blackwood. President, the Blackwood Foundation. She was in the middle of a board meeting. Her board. It was comprised of 3 of her father's most ruthless VPs, a retired federal judge, and Arthur Langley. They were all watching her. "The proposal from the Guggenheim is uninspired," Ilara said, sliding the thick, glossy binder back across the mahogany table. They're asking for 8 figures to fund a retrospective for an artist who is already overexposed. It's lazy. Denied. Elara, said one of the VPs, a man named Sterling, the Guggenheim Gala is a key social event for Mr. Blackwood. Then my father can fund it from his personal account. Elara said, her voice quiet, but carrying the unshakable weight of her new authority. The Foundation's mandate is not to fund Mr. Blackwood's social calendar. It is to fund the future. Next. Arthur Langley slid a different file in front of her. The land in the Hamptons, Ms. Blackwood. The former DeLuca estate. It has been bulldozed, cleared, and the permits are approved. The architects are asking for final sign-off on the community library. Elara opened the file. She looked at the blueprints for a beautiful light-filled glass and wood structure. It was the antithesis of the gaudy, monstrous mansion that had stood there before. It was a place of knowledge open to everyone. "It's beautiful," she said. "But the children's wing, it's too small. I want it doubled. Take the funding from the Guggenheim proposal, and I want a garden planted on the exact footprint of the old house. I want people to have picnics where that awful foyer used to be." "Understood," Arthur said, a rare, thin smile on his lips. "Which brings me," Elara said, standing to my primary initiative. She gestured to a screen, and a new logo appeared. It was a simple, elegant V. "The Vance program," she announced. The room was silent. This was her project, the one she had built from scratch. "My mother's name was Vance," Elara said, her voice steady. She was an artist, a gentle, brilliant woman who found herself trapped in a life that slowly suffocated her. She felt she had no power, no way out. Vance was also the name I chose when I wanted to build a life of my own, a life where I was valued for who I was, not what I was attached to. She locked eyes with each board member. "The DeLucas taught me a valuable, if brutal, lesson. They believe nobodies are powerless. They are wrong. This program will be the proof. The Vance program will dedicate $50 million annually to providing immediate, no-questions-asked legal and financial aid to women escaping abusive or coercive domestic situations. I'm not talking about therapy and shelters. I'm talking about a war chest. I'm talking about funding the best divorce lawyers in the country. I'm talking about security details, clandestine relocation, and the financial resources to start a new life, an Elara Vance life, if you will." "This is aggressive," Sterling murmured. "So is abuse," Elara countered. "This isn't a charity, Mr. Sterling. It's an equalizer. It's giving these women a Cyrus Blackwood of their own to fight in their corner. Any objections?" The room was silent. "Good," Elara said. "The meeting is adjourned." The VPs filed out, suitably impressed and terrified. Arthur Langley remained, closing the door behind him. "A very productive meeting, Ms. Blackwood." "Elara, Arthur, we're past formalities." "Elara, then." He placed a single thin file on her desk. "Loose ends." She opened it. The first page was the post cover of the DeLucas in jumpsuits. She looked at it for a moment, not with triumph, not with hatred, but with a cold, distant finality. The same way one would look at a notification that a past due bill had been paid. She closed the cover. "And Marcus?" she asked, her voice neutral. "Subject M. DeLuca was difficult to track," Arthur said. "He changed his name. He's using his mother's maiden name, Smith. He's in Secaucus, New Jersey. He's a barista at a Starbucks the evening shift. He lives in a studio apartment above a laundromat." Elara pictured him. Marcus, the charming, handsome, weak-chinned boy she had loved. The man who stood at the top of the stairs and did nothing. now serving coffee smelling of burnt beans and failure, a nobody in every sense of the word. She felt a brief, cold flicker. It wasn't pity. It was closure. "Is he under surveillance?" she asked. "Of course." "Stop," Elara said. "Take him off the list. He's not a threat. He's not anything. He's irrelevant. Let him live his life." "As you wish," Arthur said. He turned to leave. "Arthur, yes. Thank you. For everything. For the car. For the blanket." Arthur Langley nodded, the closest a man like him gets to an emotional display. "Your father. He moves mountains, Elara. But you're learning to build them. It's a pleasure to be on site." He left her alone. She stood for a long time, looking out over the park. The silence of the 80th floor was a stark contrast to the small, noisy Brooklyn Branch library she'd left behind. She missed the smell of old books. The door opened without a knock. Only one person on earth did that. Cyrus Blackwood entered. He didn't look at her, but at the view. He was holding 2 cups of coffee just as he had that day in the hotel. He handed one to her. "The board is rattled," he said. "They'll get used to it," Elara replied, sipping the coffee. It was perfect. "You doubled the budget on the children's wing. It's now the most expensive library per square foot in New York State. Children should have beautiful places to learn, don't you think?" He almost smiled. "I do." They stood in silence for a moment, the Titan and his heir. "I read your proposal for the Vance program," he said, turning to face her. "It's efficient, almost ruthless." "I learned from the best," she said. "Your mother. She would have loved this. The program, the library." He looked at her, his eyes for the first time stripped of their armor. "You have her heart, Elara, her empathy. I always worried that you had what that I had broken it. In you. The way He stopped. He didn't have to say, "the way I broke hers." The words hung in the air between them, a shared ancient grief. Elara had spent her entire adult life defined by that grief, by that anger. She had run from him, from his name, from his cold, calculating world. But now she understood. "You didn't break it, Dad," she said, setting her cup down. "You just put a shell around it. The DeLucas were the ones who broke the shell, and you were the one who showed me what was underneath." "What is that?" he asked, his voice raw. "Me. I'm not just her heart. I'm your mind. I'm your will. I'm not Elara Vance, the librarian who hides. And I'm not the girl who cried on your jet. I'm Elara Blackwood, and I'm not hiding anymore." Cyrus Blackwood looked at his daughter. He saw the woman who had faced down her tormentors, the executive who had just terrified his VPs, and the daughter who was for the first time his equal. He reached out, not for a hug, but to touch the plaque on her desk. He ran a finger over the name. Elara Blackwood. "I was proud of you," he said. "That day, at the auction. I was proud." "I know, Dad," she said, placing her hand over his. "I was proud of you too." He nodded a single, sharp acknowledgement. The transaction was complete. The past was settled. He left her office. Elara turned back to the window, the city sprawling at her feet. The DeLucas had made a fatal error in calculation. They thought shame was a weapon that only they could wield. They tried to strip her, to expose her, to brand her as a nobody for the world to see. But they had only succeeded in stripping away her fear. They had shamed Elara Vance, the librarian, into oblivion. And in her place, they had unleashed Elara Blackwood the Titan. And she was just getting started. That was the story of Elara Blackwood, and the day the DeLuca family learned what real power looks like. They tried to strip her of her dignity, but all they did was tear away her disguise, revealing the Titan waiting underneath. A devastating reminder that the person you step on your way up might just own the entire building. What did you think of Cyrus Blackwood's retribution? Was it too much? Or was it the perfect payback? Let me know your favorite twist in the comments below. If you loved this story of epic revenge and unforgettable drama, please hit that like button. Share it with someone who needs a story with a satisfying ending, and most importantly, subscribe to the channel for more stories like this every week. You don't want to miss what's coming next.